Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Building a Great Culture webinar series, where we talk to industry leaders and dive into what it means to keep employees happy, healthy, and engaged. I am Sarah Troop, and we have got a great show for you today. We're here with Jason Cochran, a workplace cultural strategist at Humanworks8, which is a team of business consultants who improve an organization's bottom line by building sustainable people practices. Based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they solve for business problems for clients nationwide with their elevation process. Specifically, we have Jason, and he's actually based in Indianapolis. And we were just sitting here comparing our weather. I'm in Green Bay where it's raining and just dreary, and Jason is where it's 90 and very, very dry. We're not that far apart, Jason. How's that happen?
That's right.
But a little more on Jason. Jason is a dynamic speaker and he is a thought leader. Jason brings together business know how and psychological insights into his role as business consultant and organizational psychologist at Humanworks8. He's driven to help lead change initiatives that reimagine the future of work around culture, employee experience, leadership development, and digital transformation. Recognized as the top 10 global thinker in HR, culture, and the future of work by Thinkers 360, Jason's mission is clear. He's all about improving connections between people and the workplace ecosystem. So he's perfect guest for us at Motion Connected. Welcome, Jason.
Sarah, thank you so much for the invitation to come join and be a part of this series. And thank you for everyone who's attending today. I know this is a busy time of year in the summer. A lot of times vacations are getting going, or you're getting ready. You're gearing up for vacations with the July 4th holiday coming. So thank you for coming and spending some time with us together today. And it's going to be conversational. Sarah and I are going to be having a conversation around this topic of becoming a connected organization today, using the four principles of connection. Here's what I can share with you out of the gate. You are going to leave by the time we're done today with something that seems so simple. You'll be like, oh my goodness, we could totally take this and start applying it in our organization. And if I haven't helped do that today, then I want to hear from you. Give me some feedback on LinkedIn at the very end, and let me know. But that's our goal today is we're going to make this whole concept of how do we go about creating a connected organization with connected people a reality using the four principles of connection. So Sarah, I'm ready to dive in if you are. Let's get this party
All
started.
right. Why does
All
connection matter,
right.
Jason?
Well, we talk about connection, don't we, Sarah?
Yeah.
The word connection is used quite a bit now, including in business. But what exactly does that mean? Why is it important? That's what we want to unpack here to start with. So let's talk about the case for connection. Even Gallup is starting to get involved in this discussion about connection in the workplace. In fact, some of their survey research near the end of 2023 was digging in specifically around connection. And so they're looking at a connection to culture. How does it help drive professional and personal results? Well, you can see the results there on the screen. The people who were marking that they strongly agree with the sentiment of I feel connected to my organization's culture. Look at the results then that are correlated with that. If you feel well connected to your organization's culture, you're a lot more likely to be engaged at work, more than 3.5 times. You're over 5 times more likely to agree that you'd recommend your place to work to people that you care about and know. You're going to be almost 2/3 less likely to feel burned out at work. And then around half the time, you're going to be less likely to be looking for new job opportunities. And that's really huge because we are kind of in what's more of what's called like a grasshopper economy, where there tend to be a lot of
Mhm.
folks more often now, especially the younger generations, that can sometimes have their eyes someplace else if there's something that just isn't connecting right in the work experience for them. And so you can see the case for connection, it's super important and it leads to really great results for organizations. Did any one of those for you, Sarah, really stand out that was kind of a little bit more surprising than the other?
Well, the one that just makes the first two make so much sense to me about being more engaged and more likely to recommend. But I have on a previous Great Culture, we had an entire webinar dedicated to working through employee burnout. And so that right there, the 68% less likely, really seems to be a strategy to dive in on a huge problem for employers right now. We can
I
get
love it.
people
So
connected.
we can almost think of connection as like when you go to your doctor and you're like trying to make sure you're in good health. It's like, are you getting your daily dose of fiber? Kind of thing is like, are we getting our daily dose of connection in the different ways we need to, which we're going to unpack here in a few minutes of what those are.
Mhm.
But that daily dose of connection is really important for those results.
Let's see. Hmm. All right, we're switching slides, I think. There we go.
There we go. And so obviously that, I mean, that, lets us know there is a problem around disconnection in the workplace because a lot of folks aren't experiencing those right connections in the workplace. And so I think these numbers that we're going to pop up here on the screen, there's going to be three. We're going to do them one at a time here, are going to surprise you. Here's one. Only 20% of individual contributors report that they feel connected to their culture. 1 out of 5. That's a really low number. And you think, well, managers might be better. Only 22% of managers feel like they're connected to their culture. And then quick poll here. If you hop in the chat, oops, we already put it up there. 39% of leaders feel connected to their culture. You beat me to the punch. I love it, Sarah.
I'm so
Only
sorry.
39% of leaders feel connected to their culture. And so even though, yeah, those numbers may gradually increase, I don't think that 39% of our top level leaders reporting that they feel connected to their culture is something we should feel great about, right?
No,
I mean,
no,
that's still
absolutely.
showing as much as we're talking about this and we have over the years, there's still something we're not quite getting something right when across the organization we're getting this level of people reporting that they feel connected to their culture. And again, this was just at the end of 2023. These aren't data from like a year ago. This is how we were wrapping up 2023. So we know disconnection is a problem and it's really important.
Yeah, we
Some
always
of
talk
the
about leaders walking the talk. How can leaders inspire others to be, the 80% individuals who are not connected if 60% of leaders themselves are not connected? I found that stat to be actually one of the most crazy out of all of them.
and it shows we still have a lot of work to do. But I think the promising thing, Sarah, that we're going to be talking about here is that the reason for this is because we kind of been focusing sometimes on the wrong why or the wrong reasons for why we're doing certain things in the workplace, and being more intentional about the design of designing connection in the workplace can really help with this. And some of the things that come along, the symptoms of having a disconnected culture like this, the impact is pretty staggering for people and for the business itself, as you can imagine. So a lot of times we'll talk about disengagement and things like that, but the connection piece, this is where this is different. Connection gets at the root cause analysis of why people are feeling disengaged. It's because there's a lack of connection in the right ways. And so when those connections aren't right, here's some of those impacts. There is decreased productivity. Folks just cannot be as productive in their work if they aren't fully understanding their roles, feeling engaged, feeling connected to the work itself that they're doing, right? So that's one symptom or impact of disconnection. Another one we just referenced was burnout. Folks can start to feel like they're on a hamster wheel and just not connected to the work or the work ecosystem in the right ways. And it does eventually lead to burnout over time. And this was something, Sarah, I'm curious for you, but you know, burnout was one of those things I've known about for a long time because of my
Mhm.
background as a psychologist, but it seems like it really wasn't coming to the forefront where people would voice it and talk about it in the workplace until around when COVID hit. How about you? Did you ever hear much about it before COVID?
Not at all. I mean, barely, I would say, talking to employers and what their goals would be. Burnout really wasn't something that was coming up frequently, and we have completely seen a shift now post COVID.
And it's almost like people kind of like the wool was lifted over their eyes, like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, like I wasn't supposed to, like, there's a much healthier way for us to design work. And that's kind of this interesting phase we're in right now. So that's another impact of disconnection is increased burnout. A third one that we have is obviously high turnover rates. So those of you who may be HR leaders or who really own the talent acquisition, talent optimization part of your business, obviously turnover is expensive, and it can impact employer brand. There's just a lot of things that make it really challenging to do work and to achieve your mission and goals and deliver for your clients when you have high turnover. And then the fourth one, the fourth impact of disconnection, the last one we'll list here is innovation stagnation. I think sometimes we may not often think of this, but when we don't have those meaningful connections in the right ways in the workplace, it can stifle our creativity. It can become an obstacle to our ability to innovate and think and improve upon things and for the creative collaboration. And that's something that many times may not be captured in a spreadsheet when you're looking at the bottom line value
Mhm.
of your business and the work that you're doing, but it does have a huge impact on the value of your business and the work that you're doing, even though it may not be captured all the time. And we know that disconnection, it does lead to these things that you see here on the screen, among many others.
I've
Any
never
others
heard the
that you think of,
terminology
Sarah, that you'd add? Oh, yeah, the innovation stagnation.
stagnation. And as soon as I heard you talk about it the first time, I was like, that makes so much sense. How can an organization thrive if the employees amongst it are not connected and behind the mission?
You got it. Absolutely. And it's really tough to do that, especially if you're kind of working in a vacuum, if you're a lone wolf,
Yes.
if you're kind of working. I think
Mhm.
sometimes we do have more folks that are working that way. You have to make sure you're being intentional to block off that time for connection, for collaboration with other team members, because that's what helps sparks your ideas and builds out your schemas even
Mhm.
more fuller on certain topics and things that you're trying to accomplish together. So we
And
talked
making
about impact of disconnection as well. And we've got one more here before we start talking about the solution. Okay, we understand that these are challenges around disconnection. How do we build a connected organization? There's an elephant in the room that I'm sure maybe some of you are wondering in your head and you're thinking, well, if all this just started after COVID, maybe this is because we have more people working from home that are doing remote work. So let's blame remote work for this.
Mhm.
Well, turns out Gallup has done some research on this as well. Remote work is not the cause for why we have more disconnected people and disconnected organizations. So look at these stats on here. The folks that actually are reporting the the least amount of engagement here being connected to the culture are the on-site folks at 19% compared to 20% for the remote people and 21% for the folks that work hybrid, both home and at work. And so hopefully if there's one thing we help do today is dispel this myth that somehow remote work has created this problem of disconnection. It has not. In fact, what it has done is revealed to us that this was actually a problem that was kind of lurking underneath the surface. And then the pandemic just kind of was the triggering event to be like that manifested the challenges. And so now that we know these things are real, we can address them. But remote work is not the cause because we have a lot of people on site reporting that they don't feel connected to the culture either. Was this a surprise for you, Sarah?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I feel like remote work has become the scapegoat blame for so many issues in the workplace. And one thing I think is we're not going to go backwards in time. We're not going to switch this and, bring 100% of back to people completely on site. So we have to figure out ways to move forward and stop blaming remote work for the issues in our employer workspace.
So well said. And that brings us to kind of the bulk of our conversation today is okay, now that we've talked about number one, we know connection's important in the workplace. We know what happens when we aren't doing it well. We know that it's not remote work's fault. So how do we fix this? How do we go about creating the right connections in the workplace? And the solution is really simple. So again, you remember at the very beginning, I said, hopefully today you're going to leave with something that's like, oh my gosh, this is so simple. We can totally take this and design this in our organization. It's called the four principles of connection. It is a proprietary framework for thinking about the connections that matter between people and work. And there's going to be obviously four of them that we're going to cover together over the rest of our time. And then we're going to show some examples of ways that this looks like designing those types of connections, the types of activities, the types of employee experiences that actually get into those four areas of connection. And so you can think about it in this way. You see it up there on the screen as these are kind of like the ingredients for creating purposeful and meaningful work, is another way of thinking about it. And the way that we've historically thought about connections in the workplace has been connection with one another. That's one of them, but we're going to discuss three other ones today. And so let's kick things off by starting about the very first principle of connection, which is we have to design work experiences that help connect people with themselves. And so you see the simple statement up there. Work needs to be designed to help people understand their personal values, what gives and takes their energy, and how to develop into the best version of their authentic self. And so I would imagine, if we had a show of hands today, that if I asked you this question of whenever you're hiring somebody new, how many of them do you think have their own personal values listed out, or they can truly tell you on a deep level who they are and what they're about? My guess would be maybe half the time would be a great number, is what we would say, right? There's just a lot of people that don't have that connection to self before even understanding, okay, how do I connect to the work that I'm going to do? And so some best practices we've seen in organizations when they think about designing this concept of connection to self into the work experiences are, if some of your folks, if they haven't defined a personal values, go through that process with them, or find a partner who specializes in that. We do some of that at Humanworks8, where you can come in and do a workshop on helping people discover and define those personal values to know what's important to them, because that's what values are. They're the things that are most important to you. And so it's really challenging, I think, to get the vocational aspect of your life and experience correct if you don't really have clarity on who you are to begin with. Some other things, personal purpose and vision statement can help with this, doing some life maps. These are the types of tools and things we're seeing some organizations bring in and do some learning and workshops on to help people get grounded in who they are. And this was one of the first things when I onboarded at Humanworks8, the team walked me through, because I had some personal values listed, but I hadn't gone really deep into what that was until working with the team. And so if you go to the next slide, Sarah, this is kind of the end result of me going through that. Is this is my core values image of who I am. And I have it on my desk as well every day as a focus to remind me of what I need to be connected to that's most important to me, and then make that connection to the work that I'm doing as well. So core values are extremely important here. And so you see mine listed here. They've been put together into a tree, but believing the best in other people. Platinum rule is that I want to treat others the way they want to be treated. Better way is I'm constantly trying to think of better ways to do things and improve things. Stand out, that's a reminder for me of don't just try to fit in, that I'm hired to be me, my authentic self. That's who Humanworks8 wants me to be, as well as the other people in my life. Make the connection is to connect ideas and to connect people. And then overall harmony is just a reminder of rarely are things going to be a 50-50 balance in my life, especially between personal and work. Sometimes it might be 80-20, but find harmony in that season of life, wherever it might be. And so these help me stay grounded, and they help me be connected with myself to know who I am and think through that lens whenever I approach my work. So Sarah, I'll kick it over to you. Have you ever gone through like values exercise or done things around personal values in terms of kind of connecting with yourself on a deeper level?
No, this is all new to me. I've been through plenty of personality assessments and personality traits, which I always find so interesting. How do you get to this point of having this visual tree? Is this questionnaire? Is this you just come up with it? How did you get here?
Yeah, so the visualization of it, we have a team member, AJ. He's really good with
Hmm.
coming up with the visualization piece. I just was like, you know what? After I went through the work and I knew on paper, here are my values, I had them written out. AJ was
Hmm.
like, I can make those come to life. What kind of an image would you want
Oh,
that kind of
I
pulls
see.
all this together? And just a tree for me is what I thought in terms of the roots, a strong trunk, branching out. Those different aspects is what came to mind for me. And so he took it and made it come to life just like this. And this is what we do in workshops as well with teams. It's help individual members come up with those values that mean a lot to them to where it can be something where like you can have a sticker made out of this, you can have a plaque made out of this,
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
coat of arms. But I think this is a step, Sarah, that we often skip past, this whole connection to self piece in the work experience, and we just jump right into what's the role, what are the responsibilities, the tasks,
Yep.
and things like that.
What are the
We might
talents you bring to that role? Nothing to do of how you
exactly.
perceive and want that role to be.
You got it.
Hmm.
100%. And so I
Hmm.
know sometimes leaders can think, well, this is just a kind of like fluffy stuff. And my response is, yeah, it's really important fluffy stuff before you can get to the other stuff. As one of my friends, Zach Mercurio, he does research on mattering in the workplace. He has
Yeah.
a saying that says, nothing matters to someone who feels like they don't matter.
Mm,
In other words, you can't get to
that's
the
good.
work stuff until someone is like can do it really well unless someone feels fulfilled, they have that meaning, they know how they matter. And a big part of that is knowing yourself on this type of a level. So this is just one example of something. I love that you shared assessments like Colby, like DISC,
Yeah.
that help
Hmm.
bring this to life also, because those things also help people get to know themselves on a deeper level, both in terms of what their instincts might be, the way that they problem solve,
Sure.
but also sometimes when maybe if you're not showing up your best that day, what are some ways to try and still try and show up your best, but not let those become flaws that really interfere, with being able to work collaboratively with others as well.
Well, I think it's also very affirming that none of us are perfect and not strong in every single category as it applies to work. That when you go through the assessment and see that you are very strong in certain areas and might need more help in others, I feel like it's okay to ask and it's okay to bring in someone stronger because none of us are perfect. And going through this process really helps people understand that.
I love that. And so that was principle number one. So we just shared one example with you. This is just one example. Again, there's others here. I'll be able, if you reach out to me afterward, I can share some
Yeah.
additional
I was
examples.
kind of curious what a life map was. Is that goals? Is that,
Yeah, it's almost kind of like a quilt where you lay out and you say, here's some of the, if I were to say, here's some of the important moments or experiences or things that have happened in my life, you start to lay those out in something that almost looks like just like a big grid.
yeah.
They can be positive things or they can also be negative things, things that have impacted you. And what you start to do is you start to thread through those and see what are some things here, some lessons learned from these that have
Mm,
shaped who I am today. What are some things of who I want to become? What are the experiences I want to have down the road that I want to add to this life map or this quilt that'll help me become who I want to become?
oh,
And
that's
so it's a
beautiful.
really simple process of kind of taking a step back and thinking about the experiences you've had. But again, all of these different things that we're talking about, they have to do with connecting with yourself on a deeper level, knowing yourself on a deeper level so that you can stay true to that authentic self, but also be aware of some of those, flaws at times to make sure that you're aware of
Hmm.
those and doing your best to be a good teammate with others. So that's connection to self. We need to design more experiences in the workplace from onboarding to offboarding and each of those touch points in the employee life cycle in between that help us stay grounded and connected with ourselves. The second one is the one most of us think of when we think of connection,
Hmm.
connection to other people. This one's fundamental. Work should be designed to help people understand and celebrate each person's uniqueness and how that contributes to a cohesive and effective team. Right. And so some of the best practices that we've seen and we think about at Humanworks8 are three parts of the mind and understanding that there's three parts to every person. There's how you think, there's how you feel, but then there's also your instincts, which is your cognitive mind. So there's the cognitive, how you think, there's the affect of how you feel, and then there's these things that are just hardwired in you in terms of how you're naturally going to take action. Those are your instincts, your conative mind. And so thinking well about not only yourself, which we focused on first, but thinking about others and knowing them on that level comes in really handy, and knowing how to work best and set other people up for success and collaborate with them. Another thing I've got listed here is a communication guide. That's the actual example we're going to pop here and look at. Is we use a communication guide. It's a one-page document at Humanworks8 to where we understand how each other communicates best. In other words, these are like my ideal hours of when I typically work best, when I might be doing head down work versus when I might be checking email. These are the things that I'm really good at when it comes to my communication style. These are the things I'm probably not as strong at. And a lot of times those things go unspoken, for lack of a better word, when it comes to communication. We don't communicate about communication, as ironic as that sounds. And so, to fully connect with others and make those work experiences help with this sense of connection, we've got to understand each other on that level. A couple others we've seen as well, employee resource groups. These have become more popular in organizations where they're employee led, but they're around special types of interests that people may have, and getting together and working together on those things. And then culture onboarding. So whenever you have a new hire, not just going through the typical parts of onboarding, but also really thinking well about your culture and your values and what are the steps along the way in terms of how we want to help connect them with others in this organization really well. So
Would you
before
say
we
this
look at the
principle,
examples here, yeah, what was
would you
that,
say
Sarah?
this principle is the one that employers naturally put more time and effort into of the
100%.
four? Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, it
Yep.
makes sense.
This one in the survey results that have happened, because there's a survey that digs into the four principles of connection to see how well connected an organization is. This
Hmm.
one, for every organization that's done the survey, is the highest. This is
Okay.
the one that the teams are like, you know what? This is the one where I feel the most connected. I feel connected with my team. I feel like they've got my back. I feel like they understand me. Um, Funny enough, the last one we're going to talk about today is the one that's actually the weakest.
Okay.
So I'll save that little surprise for the end. But this one is
Same here.
typically the highest one, and it's also the one, quite frankly, when most of us hear connection in the workplace, we think about social connections. We think about other people. So it is a very important piece of the puzzle. But as you're seeing today, it's just one out of four types of connections we have to design in the work experience that are really important. We reference that communication guide that we use at Humanworks8. We use it internally. You've probably heard the phrase before, eat your own dog food. So, we don't want to be using things with clients that we use ourselves. So we actually use this on ourselves. So everyone on our team has a communication guide that they filled out, one-page document that has to do with your communication basics of when's the best time to communicate, what type of mode is best for me, the methods, the environment, what are the things that make the best contributions toward, what drives those contributions in terms of passion and personal core values, and then where might you need support in terms of communication as well. And so something like this can be really helpful in helping promote those connections with others, is to get to know people on this basic level of,
Mhm.
I know how I like to communicate, but how does this person prefer to be communicated with? Thoughts or reactions around this particular guide, Sarah?
Seems so easy to do and implement. But do we take the time to do these things? And so our slides will be available to everyone. So this will be out there as a reference to people. But yeah, this just seems like a natural onboarding guide to add in for new hires and for current employees.
Absolutely. And it's something that it has to be simple. I joke with the team all the time because I can be quite simple. I need things simple for me to understand them, Sarah. And so the more we can keep things to like, hey, a one-page document, the better. And so we found
Yeah.
this to be really helpful, not only for us in building connections with others on our team, but we bring it
Hmm.
into our partner clients as well, and it helps them
Hmm.
do the same.
Yeah, very interesting. And I could see guides on all kinds of things. What's your motivation guide? How do you, what kind of things motivate you and get you going? How do you like feedback? There's a lot to be learned about people that would be helpful in connecting them.
I love those extrapolations that you just shared. And that's the thing too,
Hmm.
is yeah, we provided basic structure here, but we see partners
Hmm.
or clients that add on those additional
Yeah,
pieces. Of,
I
there's
can
other
see that.
things that we want to know, kind of our guide to really understand these people on our team to work best with them. And that's connecting with others really well.
That's awesome.
And that gets us to the third one. We've got connection to role. And so this is, just thinking well about not only the person, but the role. And is it an ideal fit for the unique talents, instincts, abilities, and interests? And then connects why their work matters and the impact it makes for others. And so this is really thinking about things around, if you've ever heard of ikigai diagramming, this is where you think
Yeah.
about vocation, passion, purpose, interest, kind of similar to the hedgehog principle.
Okay.
Um, uh, but this is a little bit deeper than that, adds a few other dimensions to it. Also helping people think about career advancement paths. Yeah, I'm thinking about the work I'm doing today, but I want to feel connected to something even bigger than just the work. I want a role. I want an identity at this organization. I want to know that there's a career path that I'm on that's heading upward in terms of additional roles, responsibilities that align with who I am, what I do well,
Hmm.
but also are things of passion and interest and what I like to do. We've also seen organizations help people feel more connected to the role by bringing in customer impact stories. I can't tell you the number of times in organizations folks are like, "Yeah, I'm doing my work, but I never hear like what kind of an impact does that have on our customers or have on the world?" Bringing those stories back in and sharing with people is critically important for people to feel connected not just to the work, the day to day that they're doing, but this concept of this role, this thing that's bigger of what they're doing. And then the last one, the example that we're going to look at together at Humanworks8, we call those "You Matter Here" conversations. So instead of like what many of you, if you're HR leaders, may have heard of the stay interview before, which is, checking in on your people maybe like at least once a year or so, and, wanting to really do an interview to make sure that they plan on staying because you don't want to lose them. They're just too valuable. We call those "You Matter Here" conversations and
Interesting.
recommend having those on a frequent basis to make sure that people are feeling well connected to their role. Funny story about this, Sarah. I used to work in schools before I worked with businesses. And I'll tell you, one of the things I saw over time that would happen is the teachers who were really good at helping manage bad behavior from students, guess how they would get rewarded the next school year?
They
By
would get
being
all the
really good
bad
at that.
students.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's like the principal will be like, "Hey, you're so good. We're going to give you, we know we've got a pod, we've got a group of kids. We're just going to give them to you because you're so good with the challenging
Mm,
behavior." Well, taking that kind of funny story and thinking about it in work, just because folks may be really good at something doesn't necessarily mean that it brings them energy,
yeah.
right? They may be
And
really
that,
good at solving certain kinds of problems. So we want to be mindful of that too. When we think about designing these connections to role, is that we aren't always just giving people the things that they might be good at, but we need to find out, does that give you energy or does it take away your energy? Just because you might be really good at proofreading and editing documents, if that doesn't give you energy, you don't want to be doing a whole lot of that, right? You want to be focused on some
mhm.
other things. So this whole concept of "You Matter Here" conversations, these other best practices, and making sure we're connecting people well with their role is challenging some of that traditional thinking of only thinking about strengths. We have to think
Yep.
about who people cognitively are, instinctually, and making sure we're designing those right fit systems between who they are, but also who they want to become in terms of that larger picture role of what they bring to the organization.
Wow, that is amazing. I took notes. I know this is recorded, but that makes so much sense to me about just because you're good at it doesn't mean it gives you energy and you want to do it all the time. That makes so much. And so the best way to find that out is just ask and have these conversations and find out what does give people energy and yeah, what is the best use of talents. That makes a ton of sense. Also, the customer impact stories. They work. I can attest to that. All of our programs have surveys attached to them, either at the end of the year or at the end of the program. And it is unbelievable how much energy it gives to the team. Even if there's a couple negative, there's always so many positive things and specifics of participants coming back and saying specifically how the programs have impacted them. And I see such an energy from the team at that point to do more, build more, bring more, because they're getting feedback on that work that they do that has meaning.
I love that, Sarah. So
Mm.
that takes me back to school too. I don't know about you. I'd love to hear from you on this. Even though I liked math, trigonometry was one of those. Like, do I really need to learn this? Like, how is this going to be applicable? Did you ever have those things in school where, why are we
All the
doing
time.
this?
Well, I'm old enough to have kids in school right now in calculus and such going, why are they learning this? They should be in statistics classes only and nothing else. Will calculus actually matter?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that was, we didn't know it at the time, but we were kind of questioning our role. Like, I know I'm a student, but for what
yeah,
I'm envisioning for my life and the things I want to be doing, do I really need all this kind of stuff?
right.
And so it's just good for us as leaders to think well about these different types of roles. And remember, just like you said, the best piece of advice, ask, what do you want? Like, yeah, we know there are
Hmm.
tasks and responsibilities that have to get done in roles, but also what are those aspirational pieces of what you want to bring into this, the way you want to design the role that are going to align best with you to deliver your best work? That's what we're kind of talking about here. And one of those
Hmm.
ways to do it in terms of asking is set up those you matter here conversations. This is a guide
Hmm.
that we, again, it's a simple document that we use at Humanworks8 and use with our partners, that you can use to have and structure that conversation around really helping to fine tune the person and the role, which often gets overlooked beyond just kind of looking at the surface level. Do you have the talents or maybe just the strengths to do it, and not looking at, is it really a good conative match and aligned with who they want to become and the trajectory of what they want to have in the
Hmm.
organization. And so, Sarah, if you share that next slide, we'll pull up
Yeah.
that You Matter Here conversation planner.
Oh, very nice.
Again, a very simple one-page document. You'll notice that the way we think, we like things to be as simple as possible so that you can get as much action as possible. And so, this three parts of the mind summary here is something that helps really think about the connection between people and that role. So think about them again, three parts of the mind: affectively, in terms of their feelings, think about them cognitively in terms of how they think, but then also think about them conatively in terms of those hardwired instincts, and think about how well aligned that person is to the role. And so, sorry, I think I used the wrong term earlier, the You Matter Here conversation planner. We actually have that later on that you'll be able to
We do.
access
Oh,
with a
great.
QR code. So we have that one as well.
Oh, nice. I think it could be very and when we first were talking about this topic, I'm like, but how can we do this, Jason? How can we? I think I kept challenging you. I'm like, I want to be concrete and have takeaways. I can see now how it'd be very easy to be intentional about having the you matter conversation, about bringing customers input, feedback back to the team and who it impacts. And of course, I mean, finding out people's career pathways, I think is typically part of a normal annual conversations, but just if it isn't, it's pretty easy to be intentional and include that.
Absolutely. I'll share one more thing too before we get to the fourth one. I know we're up against
Mhm.
time, but real quick, another simple way that these four principles of connection can be used. This is real life. There was a employee engagement leader inside a large manufacturing organization. She took the four principles of connection and had a check-in with one of her team members that she knew was going through some rough times. Just could
Yeah.
see the overt signs of like something's just not clicking here, and said, can you kind of point to on this, where are you feeling the disconnection? Where are things just not clicking for you? And this team member was able to say it's connection to role. That right there is where we need to focus our conversation, and let's unpack this, because I'm just
Mhm.
not feeling connected to the role. I feel connected to the organization. I love the values of the organization. I feel connected to other people on my team. I feel pretty well connected to myself, but it's the day to day of what I'm specifically doing that just isn't connecting really well with me. And all it took was for that engagement leader to say, hey, which of these four areas of connection are you feeling like is off? And that's what led to the conversation. And I'm happy to report, because this happened about 8 to 10 months ago, that conversation kickstarted the ability to rethink and redesign and think about that role and fine tune it better for this high performing team player that they didn't want to lose. And so that's another real life example of, yeah, we're giving you kind of like some one-page documents that we often use at Humanworks8, but a takeaway from today could even be, if you're having someone in your organization that you know is struggling, they're disconnected in some way, just use those 4 principles and say, is it self? Is it with others? Is it with the role? Or is it this fourth one? Is it connection to the organization itself that might be a little bit off? This is how simple this is to use and how flexible it is to use too. Because ultimately, this has to be what's right for your organization and your people. That's why it's a framework. It's not a indoctrinated, these are the steps you
Mhm.
must follow kind of thing. You take it and make it your own that works for your people. And that leads us to principle number 4 is, ultimately, everyone's got to be connected to the mothership, right, in order to experience purposeful and meaningful work. And that is connection to the organization. This means, are you feeling connected to the vision, the mission, the leadership of the organization at the highest level? And the work people, it should help them feel like they're part of something that's bigger than themselves, right? We've heard that phrase, that adage so many times of, it just shouldn't be about work, but everyone wants to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And that's so true. And people want the work slice of their life to be something that contributes to that as well. Just like how they choose to spend their personal time in certain organizations, nonprofits, charities, events of doing good. They want to feel like that work aspect of their life is doing the same thing. So, some of the best practices that we see around helping design connection to organization is helping people align those personal values we talked about with connection to self, bring those into view with the organizational values as well, right? That's something that's critically important here, is making sure that you have, yes, your personal values, but also understanding the organization's values and spending time thinking well about that. What does that mean? Where might there be some tension sometimes between personal values and work values? And plan for that and think through it of how you'd handle that situation. This can also be in organizations, when organizations are thinking well about, well, what are some of the service projects or nonprofits type things that we can do to give back, even above and beyond the work that we're doing. Internal comms there, that's internal communications. Interestingly, this area, we are talking about the 4 principles connection survey earlier. Connection to organization is the one that's been lowest for every organization that's gone through the survey.
Really? Okay.
Yes, this
Hmm.
is this is one. And the primary drivers for that have to do with the third bullet point there around communications.
Hmm.
The lowest rated items on the entire survey have to do with people feeling like there's strong communication from senior leadership of who the organization is, what we're focused on, where we're going, and making sure that that gets then ingrained and communicated throughout the entire organization. Big challenge there. And that leads to feeling disconnected. Folks feeling like, I'm not sure exactly what's going on or why we're doing things a certain way. And then the last one,
Hmm.
there's the You Matter Here conversation planner, and we'll go to that next slide. This is the one I was referencing earlier. This can help people feel connected to
Okay.
the organization, kind of this our version of the stay interview. So I know we kind of went through those last couple a little bit quickly here due to time, but questions, thoughts, reactions that came to mind for you, Sarah, when we talked about connection to organization.
Well, I will remind the audience or tell them at this point they can start entering questions if they have any. But I didn't really have a question on connection to the organization, but you said they need to be connected to the vision and mission. And something I think I see and hear a lot is a large majority of the time they don't even know the vision or mission, why an organization does what they do. And so it's as easy as that is, I mean, at least getting that out in as many places in front of your employee communications that you possibly can, whether it's on your stationery, it's in your bathroom, it's on your business cards, whatever that is. A lot of times employees simply just don't even know why an organization, or know the vision or mission of the organization.
That's so true. And those values, in addition to the vision and mission, that purpose statement, those values, they've got to be just kind of intertwined in the daily interactions, the behaviors, the traits of things.
Hmm.
Sometimes we call those ground rules. Like these are just the things that we expect here of all of us that make us part of this community, part of this organization. Um, and one of the clever ways, like we said with the stay interviews, is we've kind of converted this into a You Matter Here conversation planner. Again, a very simple document that you can go through with just a few guided questions of really helping that person lead the conversation of these are the things that really help me feel like I matter, making me feel connected to the organization. Um, so these are just different ideas. Again, like we said earlier, the four principles of connection is not about you have to do things this exact way, this is the exact order. It's rather a way of taking a step back and thinking more about what are the types of connections we need to design in the employee experience from the moment we have someone who might be a candidate to the moment that maybe one day they're successfully exiting and moving on to another opportunity. How do we design these four aspects of connection to self, to others, to the role, and to the organization, and the way that we do performance management and how we do employee recognition and appreciation to onboarding? This is the future of work. This is the level of human centered design that we have to start thinking about with our cultures in order to create better connected organizations. Because we can keep talking about engagement, but engagement is a lagging indicator. What we have to do is focus on the front end and make sure we're designing the right connections in the workplace. That gets to the root cause problem of why we end up with disengagement, of why we end up with turnover, of why we end up with burnout. And so, if there's nothing else, that folks take away today, I hope you take away that, fundamentally, it's not a complex problem that we have to solve. We just need a framework, a mindset of thinking about people in the work ecosystem that helps us then thoughtfully design and improve our people practices in our organization to really bring out the best connections possible in those four areas. And so hopefully today, this discussion has sparked some ideas for you. Some of these examples hopefully have sparked some things for you as well. And then lastly, if you're just looking for additional ideas, we do have a QR code at the very end here. You can click on that QR code and it'll take you to a page where we've captured other ideas around this of how you can develop those healthy connections in the workplace.
Well, I have taken away a lot, Jason. I think it's amazing. One question I see is if there's limited bandwidth of an organization, is there one principle you would start with over the others?
That's a great question. And the quick answer is I would
Mhm.
typically start with connection to self
You would. Okay.
because you don't have to, but I would just say that if you have limited bandwidth, one of the best gifts you can help someone with is helping to better understand themselves and thinking about themselves before even thinking about how they're connecting into the workplace. Because if you don't understand yourself with respect to what are my personal values, what are some of those behavioral traits that maybe come out on a disc or some of these other assessment pieces,
Hmm.
then it becomes really hard to make sure that the work experiences then are designed and optimized for that person if there's not clarity on who that person is in terms of who they are and who they show up at work as. So that would be my recommendation is if you have the bandwidth to start with some connection to self activities,
Yes.
start there first. But if not, if there's something else, if it's like, hey, you know what, we know we really need to revamp our employee recognition process, then start there. Trust your gut, trust your instincts on some of those touch points that you may have feedback from staff of like, you know what, we've been hearing that we need to revamp our recognition practices, we need to revamp performance management. Go ahead and start there. That's the freedom and flexibility of the four principles of
Yeah.
connection. But
I
if you
love
did
it.
have to start some there with limited bandwidth where you're not sure where to start, I definitely would start with connection to self type activities and experiences.
That's great. Well, that was our only question. Jason, I want to thank you so much for sharing this framework with us. It makes a lot of sense. And I think there's so many great things to bring back to our organizations and the fact that disengagement is just a lagging problem from connection. That's just a huge insight to me. It's almost too late at that point. Once you know it's disengagement, got to start with connection. So um, that wraps up our great culture webinar for today and actually for summer. Just keep your eyes on your inbox for any next episodes in the fall. We'll be back. Everyone deserves a little break, right, for summer. We will be sending out the recording and the slides to this, so you'll have Jason's information to connect with him. I really suggest following Jason on LinkedIn. He has a lot of great content and is a good resource for us all. Thank you,
Thank you so much,
Jason.
Sarah. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful summer.
Wonderful. Thank you.